Alrighty then. Well, here's part 2 of the story of the dirty pictures in the music books. Anyway, as I said in the earlier video, our music teacher was a nun, and she was not a happy camper. She was not a person who was very happy with how life had turned out, and really not somebody who really was suited to that life, really should probably never have been a nun, but in the old days it was like that, families sometimes put pressure on people to do things, and that's what it was anyway. But anyway, as I said, she wasn't a very happy person. She was also a very nervous going person, and she had a hair-trigger temper too. She was mad. She was just generally mad, and she'd take it out on us anyway. And anyway, somebody had drawn some dirty pictures in the books or whatever, or they had added to pictures that were already there. They'd drawn boobies and penises and things, on the little drawings of boys and girls that were singing and stuff. And anyway, a sister, she figured it had to be had to be some of the boys in our class that did it, because we were bad, and we were known to be a bad bunch, and all that. We were the worst class they had ever had go through there, is what we were always told, And of course it wouldn't be a girl, because girls wouldn't do that. It had to be a boy, and it had to be a boy from our class, because our class was so bad. So she got all us boys in the music room there, and this was a stinking hot day in the spring. And in that old building, we had windows that went from about 3 feet or 4 feet off the floor right to the ceiling. And this was one of these old buildings with the real high, I don't know, probably 18 or 20-foot ceilings, Anyway, she had all the blinds up, and all the windows were closed except for one window at the front of the room, which she stood in front of. It was open a crack, so she was getting a little bit of a breeze through that, but otherwise it was all closed up, and she was going to sweat it out of us. She was going to get us to tell on whoever drew these pictures, or get whoever drew them to confess, one or the other. So she was going to sweat it out of us anyway. She held one of the books up and showed us the drawings, and she said, "I know one of you did this, and basically nobody's leaving this room until I find out who did this." And so she was sweating it out of us anyway. She stood in front of that window and she cried. She was in tears, crying, and stuff. And every so often she'd turn around and say, "Well, is anybody going to own up to it?" And of course everybody was quiet, none of us was saying anything. Well, this one fella in our class, after we'd been sitting there for over an hour, sweating, the sun was beating in through the window. It was like we were like ants under a magnifying glass. This one fellow there, he says, "Boy," he said, "it's hot in here." He said just like that. And he was one of our resident smart Alex, I guess, and he said that, well, she was standing in front of that one window that was open a little bit there, crying, and she spun around on her heel, and she pointed, just like that, and she said, and she just roared at him, and she says, "Hot! It's hot, you say? Yeah, it's hot!" Like that, and she says, "Well, let me tell you this. You'll find out how hot it is when you're burning in purgatory, buddy boo, and you won't be complaining about the heat then." Well, I remember that anyway. She was like that. She'd fly into a rage, and yeah. So anyway, that was the story there. In the end, she let us all go, and nobody owned up to it, and really, I don't know who did it, and I wouldn't have told on them if I did, because you didn't tell, but, wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody from our class, actually, that did that. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. Yeah, I remember different things that used to happen, and yeah, oftentimes it was different ones in our class that would do these things. When I was in grade 8, our grade 8, I don't know why they do this, but they'll get a young woman and they'll put her in charge of a grade 8 class, which is just awful. Probably maybe baptism by fire or something, I don't know, but they used to do that back then. They'd always have some young teacher just starting out, some young woman, and put her in charge of a bunch of yahoos on grade 8. And there was more than once that our class had her running out of the classroom screaming and in tears, you know. She started to date another teacher at the school, and he was kind of a tough guy. He was a former jail guard and whatnot, and he wasn't somebody to fool around with, and she started dating him. They eventually got married. But, anyway, he got a bunch of the ringleaders one time alone out in the back behind the school, and he told them, he said, any of you clowns bother her anymore, and he said, I will personally beat the shit out of you. And that threw a scare into them anyway, so things calmed down quite a bit after that, but he just took a select few that he knew were troublemakers out to the back there and had a wee talk with them. But, you can imagine now, the way things are now, that would never happen. But back then, you know, it was different anyway. They maintained order, and there was no fooling around. But anyway, just kind of a funny story I remember, though, about the obscene drawings and the music books, and the music teacher there, the angry music teacher, and her threatening one of my classmates with a good long time in purgatory for complaining about the heat anyway. Alrighty, well, let's look at Rocky again. We always have to look at Rocky. He's sleeping there. I don't know what you can see of him, but there he is. Yeah. Anyway, like I say, the story about the music books happened back in the 1970s. The teacher threatening my classmates there because they were bothering his girlfriend. You know, that happened, that would have been around 1982 if that happened. But, yeah, anyway, I say, it wasn't all, you know, it wasn't unreasonable in a way. I mean, I saw the way that woman was treated, and, you know, some of the dirty tricks that the guys in my class played on her were, you know, you can kind of laugh at it now looking back at it, but it was terrible, really. I mean, and like I say, I still don't know what the rationale is by putting a young woman just starting out and putting her in charge of a class like that. But grade 8 is you know, I mean, I think you're just about as big a savage as you'll ever be in grade 8, you know. Really, it's like you're working up to that level of savagery until you hit grade 8. And then afterwards, you start to calm down a bit. As you grow up and mature, you start to calm down a bit. But in grade 8, most of us were at the height of our savagery, you could say. And there were some in there that were real savages, I'll tell you. You know, people you didn't want to be having to contend with on a daily basis, especially if you were just starting out in a job and learning the ropes. But like I say, maybe it was a baptism by fire kind of a thing. Maybe they figure, okay, we're going to put you right into the lion's den here, and if you survive, then you'll be able to cope with whatever comes. That might have been the mentality too, I don't know. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk to you later. Hope you're having a good night so far.